Hi there. Let's talk about radios. When you travel on a trip with me, I will always give you a two-way radio for communication. If you have your own built-in radio, it means you don't have a battery that needs to be charged because it's built into your vehicle, and it makes life a little bit easier. But I will make sure that you have a radio with you. One, it's good for communication between vehicles if we have safety issues as far as road safety goes, maybe children next to the road or a big pothole that people need to be careful of. Then I will use the radio to communicate those things with. Second thing is to tell stories. As we travel, I tell stories, and if you have a radio, then you can listen to what some people call Radio Chris, and I'll give you history and some interesting facts about the areas that we drive through. But you basically get two different types of radios or radio frequency ranges. The first one you get is a VHF radio. A VHF radio is the more modern way of doing things. The marine guys have started switching over to VHF now. The ski boats and those things, VHF is more commonly used. And we've seen the 4x4 industry also move over to VHF. In the old days, it used to be UHF, ultra high frequencies versus very high frequencies. So it's just two frequency ranges. The reason people are moving over to VHF is because voice clarity is much better on VHF than it is on UHF. So most people would move across to VHF for voice clarity. Now, the only problem that you have with VHF and why not many people have VHF or why we haven't done it before or previously is the fact that VHF radios, according to law in South Africa, must be licensed. If you want a VHF radio, ICASA has to license it, and you have to carry that license for the use of a VHF radio. The same goes for UHF radios. If the power output is more than 5 watts, then the UHF radio is also required to be licensed. Now, if you go to the outer warehouses and macros and those places, and they sell these the radio packs with the little radios in it for a few $100, and you buy it and you use it, they do not need to be licensed because one, they are UHF radios, and two, they are less than 5 watt output. So they are small and not very powerful radios. They work well for traveling between two vehicles, but they do not have the requirement for licensing. The moment you go to VHF, however, you do need licensing. Now, I use VHF exclusively. VHF, as I say, the voice quality is much better, so if I talk and I tell a story, it's easier for you to hear me and understand. The range that you get from a VHF and a UHF is the same. It's line of sight radios. If I have big buildings and things in front of me, then the signal is going to get worse. So VHF doesn't have a better signal, it just has better voice quality. So if you buy a VHF radio, then you need to license it. Now, licensing happens through ICASA, and it's a very difficult process. It used to be a lot of red tape and just time wasting through filling in forms and emails, and accounts gets lost, and I'm sure it's going better there now, but I've had my days with ICASA. So what I do now is I register my radio through the Land Cruiser Club of South Africa. There's different clubs in South Africa that has their own frequencies that they use. Hilux Club of South Africa, Land Cruiser Club of South Africa, Land Rover Club, Mitsubishi, the Off-Road Radio Association has their own channels. So all of these guys are registered with ICASA, and they hold certain frequencies that they can use for their own private use. And if you are a member of their club, then you get access to these frequencies. Now, a frequency in a VHF radio is like your car radio. If you look at the stations that's set up on your car radio, you'll have Highveld Stereo and Jacaranda and Arisgeer and you name it. And if you do not have that frequency set up in your radio, then you cannot listen to it. That's why when your radio searches, it goes through a section and then it finds a station and it says, this is Highveld Stereo, and that frequency is very specific, and it sits then on a channel. So you program it under your button number 3, and then your channel 3 is Highveld stereo. The same works on these radios. So it's got various channels, and I program one of my stations to be on one of my channels. Now, what it means is that if you phone me and say I've got channels 1 to 6, it doesn't mean anything to me, because it depends who programmed your channels 1 to 6 as to what is where. Similarly, your vehicle would be different from the vehicle next to you as to what is on button number 3. It depends how it's programmed. So most important, therefore, is the frequencies that you operate on. Now, Land Cruiser Club, of which I'm a member, is the club that I found used by most people in my industry, used by most of my guests that already have a radio in their vehicles. And therefore, it was a simple question of just going with where the most people are and sticking to that system. Now, I've got my own frequencies on there, so if I take out a group without any radios, I can switch over to my own frequency and we use only that frequency. But to make it available for people with their own built-in radios, which is a bit more powerful and it's built in, so you don't have a handheld and cables and things in the car, people want their own built-in radios, and then I need to communicate with them on a predetermined frequency. Now, the easiest way for me to predetermine it is to say Land Cruiser Club. The membership of Land Cruiser Club is not very expensive, so it's an annual fee of 150 or 200 Rand or something like that. It's not an expensive membership, and when you have your membership through Land Cruiser Club, you can also do your radio license through them. So you need to license your VHF radio, but instead of you communicating with the ICASA directly, you do it via Land Cruiser Club, and ultimately that solves the radio license problem for you. So when I do my trips these days, I use Land Cruiser Club frequencies. They've got, I think, 11 or 12, and I use 2 of them predominantly. But I can't give you those frequencies. They belong to the Land Cruiser Club. It's not my frequencies. So if you have a built-in radio and you want to join me on a trip, then I would suggest just subscribing to the Land Cruiser Club and get their frequencies, get it programmed on your radio, and off you go. If you purchased a radio from some other radio supplier and he says he gave you some of the channels, which is commonly what I hear, there's one Land Cruiser, there's one Land Rover, there's a Pajero, those frequencies generally are not on the club system. It might be old frequencies that used to be used a long time ago, but is not used anymore. So be careful of that one. If you have a built-in radio and you want to communicate with me on one of my trips, let me know so that I can confirm that you've got the right frequencies. Once you've got the right frequencies, it's easy from there on. So yeah, if you want to get a two-way radio, you're welcome to. Go for the VHFs, use the Land Cruiser Club frequencies, and you will be able to communicate with me quite easily. Remember, you then need a license. If you don't want to go that route, you just want something between vehicles that you can speak to your buddy with when you're going down to the coast, the normal UHF radios that you get in the shops don't need any licensing, and they work perfectly fine. So you can just do that. But that's it on radios. Join me on a trip and learn a little bit more on radios. Cheers.